Without the last film ending, it's surprising they found a story for continuing on the franchise. Everyone, welcome to Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments what you think of Escape from the Planet of the Apes, so we can join in film culture community, talking to love of cinema, down together, and respecting others' opinions. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to join in the film culture community, and let's get right into the synopsis. When three astronaut chimpanzees land down on Earth and find themselves amazed to find humans all across the Earth, they go about this frenzy that leads them into different research studies against the chimpanzees, and things are going on a frenzy that leads them to try and escape Earth. And getting right into positives, as always, the chimps are always good for their makeup design, everything that goes on with how realistic they look to the appeal, at least for humans looking like apes or chimpanzees, for what they're pulling off for this film. Of course, you're getting the familiar characters, three ones that are rather familiar that you're generally getting from the past films, and what you're getting out of them are good for what you're surfacing. And like I was doing in the introduction, there's something about this story that was not expected to lead into what this film was all about. I expected a resurfacing, a reboot of some sorts, but we get something that, while I'm not spoiling anything of what happened in the last film or in this film as a whole, the surface of what this film provides is surprisingly a good story that has a good cold opening to this film, that has a shock value that is surpassed by a means of just what you're getting that becomes hilarious because of how the nature of the film flows, what you're getting from the chimps and what you're getting from the humans, and that fish out of water comedy that surfaces about the way. And there is that comedy sense that really builds itself up within most of the first half, where the latter half is almost a part of the escape. What they're doing as their dramatic effect comes into play a lot more, but that's not to say the film is divided in a bad section where it feels like it's two separate films. It's something that really provides a different set of skills to what you're offering to the audience as a whole, and it becomes entertaining throughout, just through general vibes of the familiarity of these characters and everything you're expecting to get from these characters. You're getting the general reaction and the expected reaction for the humans to be shocked, and for what these chimpanzees are being shocked by, as you're getting some of the backstory to the Planet of the Apes and everything that is surfacing once you know where the setting is taking place in the past, and everything that is taking place based on what you're getting from the two films prior that still bleeds into this film because they're interparalleled and have the same remarks to the involvement of General Taylor and how they're intermixed within that environment, and what that goes into play with the chimpanzees and the effect it takes on them knowing the information they do, the research and everything that is trying to be done on them as they're talking chimpanzees. That is not natural by the of course, but of course you get some characters that are on the sides of chimpanzees along the way that really surfaces and is convenient in one sense to the plot, but is not beyond the stretch of imagination. You don't have to get wild with how wild you believe it, because it's also a sci-fi story to begin with, where it's already gonna be about talking chimpanzees, that humans wanting to support the lives of them makes sense to the standards that this film holds, and just the support that this film goes about. It's not really forcing you to choose a side. It's not going deep into how much you're caring for these animals or the humans as a whole, but it has the surface level, the amount of attention that it needs to as a whole, that goes into this final plot twist for the ending that is a huge shock that I'm not going to spoil, of course, but that's really turns the tides and brings back something that you know it's going to lead into the next film, and it's a lot more obvious where the film is kind of leading toward, more than what the second film left us off on, just having a cold ending, and just the general vibes, the flow throughout is interesting enough to pay attention to as a whole. But going into some of the mixed actions, what you get after this film is generally plain when you're expecting a sci-fi film, because what you get from the first two films is something that sort of takes place on another planet, or another action type of vibe of the sci-fi atmosphere that builds something completely different and something compelling, because you're not used to the nature of what it is showing on screen. And this takes us back in an inverse manner, where the first two films brought the humans down to the chimps. This has the chimps going down to humans in the past, where the world is as it is today. And so what that has to entail means it's mostly a plain environment, which isn't horrible, but you're also getting all of these different scenes that brings a bit of comedy at some sense, but also in the same sense goes about different scenes that prolongs the story in a natural way, but not always in the entertaining way or convenient way to what you're wanting to love of the build-up for what you're going to end up getting with how the chimps get on this uprising and this build-up. And while this film is essential to the plot that creates this loop from what we get in Planet of the Apes 1968 to how we're ending off this story in Battle of the Planet Apes, as I'm assuming, having not watched all of them yet, just what you're getting from this is surfacing the level of a build-up to the story that is wanting to go to, that still keeps this film to be good enough for what you're going to, having the different sides of supporting the chimps and what you're wanting to do with the research based on the different things, based on how humans are presuming different things about what the chimps may have been doing, different things they say amongst the humans, and just how that all flows out. It creates a different dynamic that isn't always the most attentive filled with what you're wanting necessarily, if you're wanting something that's something familiar. And so as the mixed aspects, I was sort of on the fence of some of the aspects of the story, which is why I'm putting it here, as it may not connect with everyone that is watching this film as well. And going into negatives, as surprising as the plot ending was, ultimately there were some familiar characters that brought familiar tropes that was not too compelling to the nature of things, of how the story flowed, things that were predictable in the sense of how you're expecting these characters behave, and just the general nature of the familiarity of Earth as it is, and not getting too much outside of the research, outside of what you're building upon the characters, upon the world building of Earth as it is in that time, at that period. Even if it is around this age, there's nothing that really establishes the world in its greatest importance outside of what we're getting from what we know of the Earth and what we know of the timeline that this story establishes as a whole. So that's all for my review of Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which I have to rate simply 6 out of 10, where it's a pretty good film, but it has its mix-up along the way that doesn't keep it completely entertaining throughout. But let me know down in the comments below what you think of this film as a whole. Was it good? Was it bad? Or was it somewhere in the middle? So we can join in this film culture community. Make sure to like this video, subscribe if you're already, and do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.